Hello again. The Dutch artist Maurits Escher drew this waterfall and mill. How can we know whether this could be a model of a real waterfall? In other words, how can we validate this picture? Well, we could just have a look and check for face validity. Does it look plausible? Second, we could rely on theory to argue whether it makes sense. We could, for instance, invoke theory of gravity or theory from physics about work and friction. Third, we could try to actually build the thing in practice. That is what the agent-based modeling approach attempts, only with agents we build it in the computer. This is called in silico, in contrast to in vivo. And now you also understand the motto, let's meet in silico, of the Silico Center for Agent-Based Modeling in the Life Sciences, based in Wageningen. Finding out whether a model is a good or a bad representation of a real system is called validation. How to validate depends on the purpose of the model and on the modeling technique used. In the case of agent-based models, the purpose is often understanding the dynamics of a system. In the waterfall case, could the water keep flowing? But let's turn to a real case. It's a bit long, but it makes the point well. Let's go to China. In China, resource efficiency has always been important. Many high-rise apartment buildings were created some years ago that are now in need of maintenance for making them more energy efficient. The inhabitants have to contribute to the cost though, and they get to decide about renovation. Will buildings actually be renovated? Well, one could create scenarios for energy prices, renovation investment cost, compute the economic optimum across 50 years for when to innovate, and then tell the inhabitants this. But they might not listen. Two of our students, Jillian from Canada and Jinjuin from China, created this model on housing renovation in China. It shows 4 hypothetical buildings and their inhabitants. Patches are apartments. The darker a patch, the higher its energy consumption, so it's randomly spread in the beginning. The darker the agent in the patch, the inhabitant, the less efficient that agent is. For instance, they might leave the window open when they're not there. The head of an inhabitant is green when he or she agrees with the renovation, red otherwise. Inhabitants are influenced not only by their economic calculation, but also by their neighbors. When 2/3 of the neighbors agree, then the building is renovated. This can happen only once during the simulation. A run takes 600 ticks that stand for 50 years. So let's start a run. You see the buildings slowly becoming darker. The northeast is where they have a long-term horizon and they have a small threshold for complying, so few neighbors have to agree. And that's the one that innovates first, and you see energy use going down here in this picture. And now you see the same for the northwest. Southeast has now renovated, and you see their energy consumption going down, and now southwest has innovated too. The simulation allows only for 1 renovation per building, otherwise the north side would probably have renovated once more. Let's now look on the top left. You see 2 sliders there. That are the 2 variables that are so important for the model's dynamics: energy price and investment cost. Let's run it again with double the energy price. So it is going to pay more to renovate. And you see the difference. Renovation actually is faster here. Basic consumption does not change, but practice does. Here. Because people try to save energy. You see them turning white and practice consumption going down because they can feel their cost. Now let's also try maximizing investment cost for renovation. What do you expect will happen this time? Let's wait and see. Renovating is expensive. If you have a short-term horizon, as have the inhabitants in the bottom, you may not think ahead far enough to want to renovate. The investment will not pay back within 25 months. So the number of people agreed takes a plunge. No majority forms in favor of renovating on the south side. So, now that you've seen the model, let's face the question, how can we validate it? Remember, its purpose was to understand how to minimize energy consumption under various scenarios of energy price and investment costs. Its premise was that inhabitants decide based on economic calculations with a certain time horizon and being influenced by their neighbors. These are the two sliders on the top left. So how to validate? Well, first there is face validation. To me, the model seems plausible, and Jinjuin, the Chinese student, also thought so. What do you think? Then there is theoretical validation. Are there theories that were used to implement the inhabitants' behaviors, for instance? Well, yes. Actually, Jillian and Jinjuin did quite a literature review to inform their model. Here we see the references. From it, they got some of their design ideas. Third, we could consult experts, managers and inhabitants of high-rise buildings in various parts of China, for instance. If we consult enough of them in a systematic way, and they agree somewhat, then they may be able to tell us whether the model behaves in accordance with their combined experience. And it's called expert validation. Although it's never precise, it can be quite convincing. Experts tend to understand the system trends very well. Finally, there is the real system. If we had data about actual buildings and renovations over the past 50 years, together with data on energy prices and renovation cost, as well as data on what percentages of inhabitants voted in favor of or against renovation, then we could try feeding this data to the model to check whether the output matched what the model shows. And this is called retrodiction. Do you think this would work? First, obtaining all those data is really a big if. Probably such an exercise would show that this model is not detailed enough. And if it cannot retrodict, then it cannot predict the future. On the other hand, we can expect that the trends in the model do match those found in empirical data, so that the model could serve as a help in understanding the system and possibly also in informing inhabitants of such buildings of the roles of prices, costs, time horizon, and social contagion. Conclusion: how to validate depends on the model's ambition and purpose. This housing model is a good model for illustration or for understanding. It combines economical, technical, and social elements. It helps understand the dynamics of the system, but it's not likely that it could actually predict when a real building would be renovated. That's my idea. I have not tried it. Validation also has a rigor versus relevance issue. The most rigorous validation is data-based. But if this meant spending years on modeling more precisely and collecting more data, then perhaps a simpler, expert-validated model would have yielded better policies, cost less time, and yielded more energy savings in the end.